Talking with the experts.
Discover how Jim Salvucci transformed bosses into great leaders through personal development and behaviour change in episode 531.
And I'll give you an example of a habit you probably formed in an instant. It didn't take 20 days. The first time you looked at you used to have maybe a flip phone, right? These old boxes, those plastic boxes, not very interesting, right? You don't care. If it rang, you answered it. Maybe you looked at it once in a while, see what's going on. Not much. Then one day you got a smartphone and you looked at it and it was beautiful and it was interesting and you were curious about it. And they say, okay, and you put it away. 5 minutes later, what did you do?
Got it back out again and started programming all my contacts and setting up my apps and
started having fun with it, right? and ever since then, you've been looking at it.
Yes.
Yeah. You formed that habit in an instant. It didn't take 20 days. It was that moment you formed a habit.
Talking with the experts.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts, where we believe that success is a journey, and every journey is easier with help from friends. That's why we bring you top-notch experts and real business heroes eager to share their lessons from the road to success. We delve into new topics each week: effective marketing strategies, innovative problem solving, financial planning, and team building. We tackle everything you need to know to grow your business and keep it thriving. Whether you dream about launching your first startup or a business veteran looking to shake things up, we've got you covered. With each episode, you'll gain knowledge, boost your confidence, and be inspired to take action. So, grab a coffee, make yourself comfortable, and join our exciting journey. You're not alone in this. We're here, guiding you, cheering for you, and celebrating each milestone. Let's turn your business dreams into reality, starting today. Here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is all about business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today my guest is Jim Salvucci, and he's going to be talking to us about leadership and personal development. Now, Jim has a PhD, is the founder and president of Guidance for Greatness, and he previously served 3 decades in universities as an English professor. He's been a dean and a provost before refocusing on the corporate world. In addition to his PhD in English from the University of Toronto, Jim is certified Tiny Habits coach, and I'm really keen to find out what that is. He's a Thrive Global coach and a life coach and holds certifications from the Institute for Management and Leadership at Harvard, as well as from the Institute for Chief Academic Officers at the American Council of Education, and he currently resides in the US. Jim, thank you so much for joining me today, and it's been such a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rose.
Yeah, so tell me how you went from being a 30-year educator to becoming a coach.
Well, I'm still an educator. So I'm an educator through and through. There's no real difference in that sense. So I spent 30 years in higher education. Like you said, I was a professor, and then I went into administration. I had always been a leader my whole life, just in various ways. I was in Boy Scouts when I was like 12 years old. I got thrust into a top leadership position, way above anything my rank or my age would warrant. I was a boss at 18. I had employees, and I just constantly got pushed into these different positions. And I was a pretty good leader. I was a good gut leader is what I would say, right? Very intuitive, and I was okay. And then I was a professor at a small school outside of Baltimore in the States. And I was asked to become the dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, which was great, except there was no School of Humanities and Social Sciences. So I had to found the school and started putting this school together, realized that, it's actually pretty easy. It's like nuts and bolts, right? You put this with that. The tough part was getting it up and running and keeping it running. How do you do that? That requires leadership. And the stakes were much higher now than ever before in my life. And I realized I needed to up my leadership game. So I looked at my bosses. It was reporting to the provost. He reported to the president. They were bosses. They weren't leaders. And I make a strict distinction there. I looked at my fellow deans. They were flailing around wildly. I imitated them for a while. Didn't go very well. And one day I realized I just got to figure this out on my own. And I started studying leadership like it is a discipline. So my first discipline was English. My second discipline became leadership. Read books, went to trainings, started applying what I learned, and learned from my many mistakes that I made. I also learned what I call learning from the negative paradigm. In other words, seeing other people make mistakes and learning from their failures, and seeing systemic breakdowns and deriving lessons from that. Eventually, I moved on, like you said, to a couple other institutions, was a provost. And then I left higher ed, and I thought, what did I really love about being an administrator? And the thing I loved more than anything was the educative part, right? I was still an educator. I coached and mentored young leaders to become great leaders. And I decided that's what I want to do. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Interesting journey through all facets of, being an educator. And I guess a coach is an educator but I guess a different title, it's all on the same thing, really, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. And one of the big insights I had when I was a dean very early on was that every leadership problem that you can face is really a teaching problem. In other words, you use the same skills. And the more I've looked into it, the more I've realized that there's no fundamental difference between a great teacher and a great leader. None. It's just a matter of circumstance, title, that's all. Everything else is pretty much the same. You do exactly the same things, which is something a lot of the teachers overlook and a lot of leaders overlook at their peril. But that's teachers are leaders and leaders are teachers.
It makes a lot of sense, and I guess we don't really look at it that way. In general, we look at teachers and leaders as being two separate entities, when in fact a teacher leads their students to broaden their skills and make them better people.
And that's exactly what a leader does. If one of the highest callings of a teacher is to create new teachers, right? If you're a teacher and your students become teachers, that's a great compliment. If you're a leader and you're not producing leaders, you're not much of a leader. Leaders beget leaders.
I agree. There's leaders and then there's managers, and the two aren't the same, even though people like to say they are the same. They're not. I mean, if you can be a manager and manage people, but leading them is a totally different kettle of fish altogether.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I make a strict distinction between bosses and leaders. I don't use those terms interchangeably at all.
I don't either. I've had plenty of great managers. I mean, they've been really great managing people, but they are terrible leaders. A lot of them were micromanagers, which is absolutely, goes against everything that I as a employee, railed against time and time again, because I don't like to be micromanaged, and I don't think many people do. So yeah. It's hard to be micromanaged when you know that there are sometimes better ways of doing things, and the manager won't take on board your suggestions. And as a leader, that's what you should be doing. Your people that are working under you should be able to express their opinion or their ideas, and the leader should be able to take those ideas and perhaps, if they're fit, will move forward with them.
Sure. And even so, even if the manager, the micromanager will say, and the employee are doing exactly the same thing, no one wants to have someone breathing over things. No one wants to have their work checked. I was working with a coaching client recently, and her boss was checking her work all the time and redoing her work. And she was doing the same thing to her. She was a manager. She was doing the same thing to her employees. And we had a little discussion about empathy. And she wised up pretty quickly and had a great breakthrough. But it was like, all of a sudden she realized, I shouldn't be doing what my boss is doing to me. I don't like it. It's not good. And as soon as she started doing that, her people started flourishing, right? As soon as she loosened the reins, they started flourishing. It wasn't that they were disagreeing or they had other suggestions or this or that. It was just simply nobody wants to live under the pressure of someone looking over their shoulder.
Absolutely. It's a bit like being a helicopter parent, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's awful. It's
No
oppressive.
one can grow, no one can thrive through all that. Jim, I'm really interested to learn about your tiny habits coaching. I've never heard of that kind of coaching modality before. What is it, and how is it beneficial?
Yeah, so Tiny Habits is a program that was developed by a Stanford researcher named BJ Fogg. He runs their behavior change lab. And what he's discovered is numerous things. He's a researcher. He does the work. He's not reporting other people's work. And he's discovered some incredible breakthroughs. For instance, all of our behaviors break down into 3 elements, right? Everything we do. You have a motivation, whether you want to do it or not. You have an ability, whether you can do it or not. And then you have a prompt, something that gets you to do it, right? Something that sparks it, some sort of trigger. Everything we do has those 3 elements. And when we want to form new habits, or we want to get into routines, or we want to do something new, we often lean on motivation, right? We say, okay, if you're not motivated, then you're not going to do it. And we condemn people, we condemn ourselves for not being motivated enough. Problem with motivation is it fluctuates wildly. I mean, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the States, when, around January, the gyms are all full because people made Christmas resolutions, right? Or I should say New Year's resolutions to go work out in the gym. February, they're empty, right? Their motivation fluctuated, right? It isn't that they're bad people or anything like that. It's just, that's just natural. So one of BJ's great breakthroughs was to realize that what if we manipulated, instead of the motivation, we manipulated the ability. In fact, we made it so easy to do that even if your motivation was low, you're still going to do it. And so an example would be, let's say you wanted to do more push-ups, right? Say, I want to do 100 push-ups a day. Well, you're not going to start with 100 push-ups. You're not even going to start with 10. Start with 1. Just do 1. Make it so easy to do that your motivation doesn't really matter. So if you feel like, I don't feel like doing push-ups, I can do 1. His other really big breakthrough is to discover that we don't form habits over time. Time isn't a factor there. You've heard 22 days, a new habit, 3 months, 6 months, 90 days, all these different things. The reason there's so many of them is because they're not true. In reality, what forms habits, what locks them in, is emotion. So every single habit you have, when you formed it, there was some emotion that created that habit, good, bad, or indifferent. There was an emotion. And so what we do in Tiny Habits is we help people develop habits by celebrating. And this isn't a reward system. It isn't like a week later you get to have chocolate or something like that. It has to be immediate, has to be right then and there. And you've got to feel, you can have chocolate. That could be your celebration if you want. But, it has to be right then and there. So your mind connects that celebration, that emotion, with the actual performance of the habit, the behavior, right? And you can lock that in instantly. And I'll give you an example of a habit you probably formed in an instant. It didn't take 20 days. The first time you looked at you used to have maybe a flip phone, right? These old boxes, those plastic boxes, not very interesting, right? You don't care. If it rang, you answered it. Maybe you looked at it once in a while, see what's going on. Not much. Then one day you got a smartphone and you looked at it and it was beautiful and it was interesting and you're curious about it. And they say, okay, and you put it away. 5 minutes later, what did you do?
Put it back out again and started programming all my contacts and setting up my apps and
started having fun with it, right? and ever since then, you've been looking at it.
Yes.
Yeah. You formed that habit in an instant. It didn't take 20 days. It was that moment you formed a habit. So, that's how habits form. It has nothing to do with time. So we, in Tiny Habits, what we do is we teach people, we call them recipes. We help people create recipes where there's a behavior and they anchor it to something. They attach it to something, something they already do, a routine or another habit, whatever. And then they perform the behavior and then they celebrate it. And the behavior has to be incredibly tiny, either a very scaled down version of what you want to do. You want to do 100 push-ups, you do 1, or what we call a starter step. You want to go for a walk, you just put on your sneakers. And the idea is that you celebrate that, make that the habit. And once you do that, you start to add to it. And it's like planting a seed.
Mhm.
It's incredibly powerful. And next thing you know, at one point I injured my shoulder, so I don't do it anymore. But I'm not like a workout guy. I was doing 120 push-ups plus a day. I never worked out. I don't care about this. But, I just started doing it with a tiny habit and I kept doing it. And it kept getting more and more and more. And I was doing all these push-ups. I was doing it in blocks of 30. And then completely unrelated, I injured my shoulder. So I had to stop that. Now I do planks and to replace it. But I still have that habit.
Mm. Okay, yeah, makes sense if you start off small. I mean, and that's what we taught at primary school is start something small and then build up over time. And usually when you're going to the gym, start off small and build it up to something. But I get what you're saying about you've got to find that gratification to cement that habit. It's no
You
good
want to be satisfied.
Yeah, you've got to be satisfying for you. And even if it's a self-reward where you're not getting something material, but you're feeling accomplished, I think that will cement that habit in future.
Yeah. And BJ Fogg calls that, there's the emotion of success. He calls that shine. So that's what you want to feel. Now you can feel, it could be a negative emotion. We don't encourage that, right? There's habits you form because of a negative emotion, but with shine, with the celebration, you feel that success. And that's a big part of tiny habits is feeling successful. And there's a lot of other aspects to tiny habits. It's very complex actually, but those are the basics.
It's really interesting. And I think, I think most of us try to form positive habits through positive reinforcement, I guess, and try and, continue those habits. But what happens when you're feeling good about this particular habit or behavior or whatever, and a negative, you've been happy about it for a long time, and then all of a sudden something negative happens, like you did with you hurt your shoulder. How did you transition from doing the push-ups to doing planks and still feel that same upper emotion?
Yeah, it's funny. I was doing it so long, the push-ups, that when I hurt my shoulder, first off, I didn't want to stop until I realized this is dumb. So I stopped, and I replaced it with planks, and which don't hurt my shoulder. But it was because it was a habit. I felt compelled to do it. Right? I used to bite my nails. That was a habit. It wasn't a good habit, right? But I bit my nails, and if I weren't biting my nails, I felt that. I felt compelled to bite my nails. That's what a habit is. It becomes like a compulsion. You want to do it. So you try to form positive habits. And you can use tiny habits to also unravel habits. We don't talk about breaking habits because that's incredibly hard to do. It's more like it's a much more involved process. And that's how I actually stopped biting my nails.
Yeah, I used to bite my nails as a kid, probably up until I was about 18, I think. And then I bought some of that nail stuff you put on your nails, and it tasted really bad when you put it on your nails. So I didn't, and I thought, geez, my nails were growing. And I thought, geez, I like that better than having really short, ugly nails. So yeah, that I had to use something to change and feel proud that I had nice looking hands up and not, ratty looking things. So, you can do things, and sometimes you can replace a bad habit with a good habit by just changing or tweaking something.
Yeah. And that's what I ended up doing, because I actually did my nails until, a couple of years ago. And I replaced it with a habit where I don't put my fingers in my mouth. I just don't put my hands near my mouth. And I created a habit where I would pull my hands away every time they get near my mouth. And it actually developed it very quickly. And that keeps me from biting my nails. And also I started playing ukulele, and it's nice to have nails to do that.
Ukulele. I don't know a lot of people that play a ukulele. I know a lot of people who play guitar, but is it ukulele the same, finger and chord?
Yeah, it's different stringing, different tuning. So the chords are different. There's only 4 strings. So it's a lot easier to play.
Oh, well done. So as a good leader, how can we form these tiny habits within our team so that there's always a positive outcome?
Yeah, I mean, tiny habits can be a very individual thing. So you're not going to form a team habit, but you can work with people. If you know the techniques of tiny habits, as I do, you can work with people to help them develop new positive habits. For instance, tiny habits is a useful way of getting rid of negative paradigms that we carry around, these limiting beliefs that we have. I'm not good enough, that sort of thing, or even alleviating stress. So I've worked with a lot of clients who, they get stressed out, and we talk about what they feel when they get stressed out. Maybe they say, "Oh, my shoulders ache." What's their physical sensation? How do you know you're feeling stressed? And then we create a tiny habit recipe where they will then take that time and breathe, right? Take a deep breath, or do something that's positive, or even just walk away from their work, or whatever the source of stress is, depending on the person. So that's one thing that you can do. So you can help people mentally relieve their stress, really get rid of negative paradigms. But you can also help people develop work habits, right? How to approach work. A lot of tiny habits is involved with just getting yourself started. If there's a task you have to do every day, using tiny habits to follow up on that task. Tiny habits is also a great way, and this is wonderful as I age, it's a great way to remember things. So there's all these things I do every day, these routines, and every day I would forget this and forget that. Now I never forget because I created habits around them. I know I'm going to journal at this time, and as soon as I'm done journaling, I'm going to go empty the dehumidifier in the basement. This sort of thing. I don't forget. Every day it gets done because I feel compelled to do it because it's a habit.
Yeah, I love that. I've started to form habits now too, to remember to do things, because we do become forgetful as we age, and having a routine or a habit, I guess, is helpful for us to remember the things that we need to accomplish during the day.
Right. And I've been forgetful. I came forgetful, so I'm not developing it. It's just getting worse.
Jim, it's an interesting concept, and I would really love you to share where people can find out more about these tiny habits.
Yeah, go to tinyhabits.com. That's the most obvious thing. There's a book called Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. He does it. You can get an Audible version, and he does a great job reading it himself. If you go to tinyhabits.com, highly recommend that you go to the top. There's something called the 5-day program. And I used to coach in this program. I sort of miss it. And we get people from all over the world in that program. It's free. You can do it as much as you want. And it's just a great thing to do. In 5 days, you will form 3 new habits, and you won't spend any time doing it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, 5 days is a lot." Oh, no. If you spent 45 minutes over that entire week, I don't know what you were doing. It doesn't take that long. It's all done through email. And the coaches work with you through email and guide you along and help you formulate tiny habit recipes that you can then develop habits with.
Absolutely wonderful. Now, you've got another website, Guidance for Greatness. Tell us what's in there.
So Guidance for Greatness is my business website. And it just explains what I do. I'm a speaker, so it talks about, my speakers page isn't hooked to it yet. It's created, but I just have a generic one right now. I have somebody working on that. But that'll list my signature talks and whatnot. There'll be a sizzle reel soon enough too on it. It also lists some of my philosophy, the different programs I do in terms of coaching and consulting. So it's just a basic description of what I do. And then it also links to my podcast and blog, which is called On Leading with Greatness, which is on Substack at jimsalvucci.substack.com. And that is very simple. I write an essay every week, and then I read it aloud. So some people like to listen to it. So
absolutely.
Now,
there's a free resource on the Greater Leadership website. It's a toolkit. What is that?
Yeah, the Great Leadership Toolkit.com. Yeah. So that is a free resource. If you go to Great Leadership toolkit.com, all one word, .com. You can download this free resource. It's just a series of exercises, 5 things you can do to help improve your leadership very quickly. And each one, this is the bonus, each one has a tiny habit recipe attached to it. So you can form a habit around that behavior.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you did mention that you have, do you have a book of yourself? Have you written a book yourself?
I have a book drafted. I'm talking to a publisher right now. We're emailing back and forth. So they're looking like they're going to make an offer. So hopefully that'll come out pretty soon.
Well done. Look forward to seeing that when it comes out. You can also, where else can people find you, Jim, if they want to find out more about what you do or, about tiny habits?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's easy enough. The website's good. My Substack is good. I don't do a whole lot of social media. I pretty much limit that to LinkedIn now. I have accounts. I just don't use them much anymore. And Tiny Habits, like I said, tinyhabits.com is the best place to start there. And I strongly recommend people get a copy of the book or listen to it on Audible.
Wonderful. I've really enjoyed learning about these tiny habits and how we can move forward with them every single day. It doesn't take long, and there's no miracle, timeline or anything like that. As long as we're happy about forming something that that is has a positive outcome attached to it, we can all form habits to them with everything.
Yeah, and the greatest thing is, and this has been very important to me, you learn the skills of change. You learn how to change for the better.
Wonderful. Yeah. If you were to give any advice, Jim, or some words of wisdom to our audience, what would they be?
If you want to be a good leader, the simplest thing to do is just be a decent person. If you start there and you stick with that, you're a long way along. Leadership principles are very simple to understand, very simple to grasp. They're not complex. There's a million leadership books and they make it sound like it's really complex. It's not. What's hard is, just like when I became a dean, implementing them and keeping them up and running.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah, that can be quite challenging for all of us. It comes with parenthood, comes with being a boss or a leader. So being a decent person, I think, is number one in my book.
Yep. If you don't start there, you're doomed. You're not going to be a good leader.
Absolutely. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing with our audience today about tiny habits.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.